Hello, everybody. This is the Analytic Alchemist, and tonight I've got a bit of a full house here. I've got, once again, back on for the second time, good friend Unexpected Wonder. Introduce yourself, Wonder.
Good. You dub back here again here in 2019. Let's get it.
All right, awesome. Also, tonight I have with me Mr. Brass. I believe he's back on for the second time too. Yes, introduce yourself, Brass.
Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Brass, and it's nice to be here and get to talk to Unexpected Wonder and my good old buddy Eric. I think this is going to be a funny hangout.
Yes, indeed. And then we have, for the first time, Mr. Buckley, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's your name?
Yes, that's my name.
Hello?
He said yes,
Yeah.
that's his name.
No, that wasn't him. Mr. Buckley.
I'm here.
Told you? Mr. Buckley. Mr. Buckley.
Oh man, I think we lost him. Let me try
He
to
went
ring
into
him.
the shadow realm.
I'll try to ring him back in.
He got lost in the Phantom Zone, fam. Negative Zone. But like, shadow realm, Phantom Zone, Negative Zone. He's traveling through all the dimensions. Oh.
Especially the flat ones.
Man, this has never happened
Did
before.
you know? You did not just say the flat ones. This man is trying to instigate and trigger. That's what he trying to do. You gonna catch me that weekend at the Juice game too.
Not sure if it's his connection.
It's the Vatican cut off his feed.
Bro, I told you somebody got that bootleg connection. Somebody got that 2012 connection. You thought I was playing?
Oh man.
Well, it's just the Vatican came in and they cut his feed.
But they didn't do that with Max though.
So wait, well, Max is a Vatican apologist.
What? But you would have thought they started to cut off the feed because I mean this man going against the powers that be though.
No, he's controlled opposition. If Max watches
Controlled
this,
opposition. So, sir, what would that serve? A controlled opposition.
Well, the Vatican's very much responsible for the chemicals that they're putting in the water.
What
the
if
frogs
they're putting
gay.
chemicals in the water? Would that not affect them? You know.
Well, it's all to turn the friggin' frogs gay.
Hey, speaking of gay frogs, I sent Alex Jones a friend request earlier on Facebook.
Hey,
Whoa, hey, you
Are we
went to
li-
the Shadow Realm. Yeah, we're live.
Oh, he went through the shadow realm. He went through the negative zone and the phantom zone. Oi!
So it's
He
okay
made
though.
it back. Oi, boys.
it's fine. My internet sometimes crashes. It
I
happens.
told you.
That's okay.
At 2012.
We
Eh,
used Monster Reborn and we got him back.
Vatican cut off your feed.
Bro, Monster Reborn was banned for a reason, fam.
It's back now. But all right,
Since when?
Mr. Buckley, you didn't get to give your introduction, so I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Well, hello. My name is Mr. Geocon. I run a channel called the Geoconservative, and on that channel, I have been posting just a couple of live streams about sort of right-wing politics, and that's what I plan on my channel being about: right-wing politics in America.
Okay, awesome. Great. And I'll link everyone to your channel in the description below, as well as everyone else's channels here. Tonight we're all gonna kick back and talk some politics. Now,
Pretty much what you saying is it's a civil war. That's pretty much what you're
yes,
inviting.
Yes. Now, bloodshed may or may not be permitted. It depends on the situation. If
But
you want, you may
the
draft.
Alchemist, what's so civil about war anyway?
You gotta love that Guns N' Roses reference. Now,
No way their weapons. That's the
uh,
civil part.
since Mr. Geocon requested this stream last night, I want you to flesh out your political views a bit more for us, and maybe we can just pick up the conversation from there.
Oh, well, my views are mainly it's sort of if I may, if I may, I'd like to go into a little bit about my political journey to so that I can you can get a good idea of where I am coming from. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So when I first got somewhat involved into politics, I was a progressive, which was kind of odd because I was raised Catholic and my parents are both Fox News conservative types. But, I was a progressive in my late teens. And I was mainly into it because, I liked all the, I was an autist and I liked the whole you know, autistic stuff, and I liked the Tumblr genders because I thought they were cool or something. It was really dumb. I did not know anything about anything back then. I just kind of assumed that if you were a good person, you supported Black Lives Matter and transgenderism and stuff like that. And I slowly came to realize that no, there were actually other options other than progressivism or being or evil, you know. And so
Wait, your parents never talked to you about politics? I
no,
just gotta ask about that.
no,
Interesting.
they never talked to me about politics because uh, they were like in their actual politics they were basically like business conservatives. They liked like a moderate free market, and they supported Ronald Reagan and then Ross Perot and then George Bush, and they didn't like Obama. But other than that, they didn't really have a kind. But they weren't very vocal about their politics at that time.
I guess did you never actively ask them about it?
Well, the only time I remember asking them, saying anything to them about politics at that time, because you have to remember, I was mainly into like nerd stuff and anime at that time. I wasn't really into politics, but whenever I was involved in politics, I took the progressive side of things. Like I remember getting into an argument with my dad in which I called him a racist because he didn't support Black Lives Matter. Yeah, it was not a fun. It was not a fun evening. Let's just say. I've
Not
learned.
a good way to open up a conversation.
Well, I was a teenage progressive who thought that I thought that I read my politics was basically me reading a blog called the Transgender Catholic and watching Black Lives Matter videos on Facebook. That was my politics.
Transgender Catholic? That's a thing?
There is a blog. I think there was a blog, or at least there was a blog called the Transgender Catholic. You can look it up. It basically is like a Catholic trans person trying to promote transgenderism and just basically calling anybody who disagrees with whoever they are. I don't know what gender they are, and I don't really care because I don't read them anymore. They're basically calling people transphobic and saying, and reinterpreting all of Catholic dogma to fit their own worldview. It's weird. It's just don't. Anyway, so I started reading more. I started actually meeting other progressives and realizing that they weren't very nice people, to put it mildly. And I eventually, in 2016, I eventually got involved in, the alt-right, basically. And I watched.
But how did you flip that much, though?
You got
You
to
know,
That's kind of a major shift.
that is a major shift. But you have to keep in mind that my progressivism was mainly born out of my utter ignorance of anything, really.
Well, that's basically everyone on the progressive side's experience.
I mean, well, not everybody. I mean, there are progressives and leftists that are very well-read, well-informed people, but that was not me. Okay.
I think Uger was one of those.
It's like when I actually, let me put it to you this way. When I actually got involved in politics and started reading for the first time, I became like alt-right libertarian. And, I really liked, the people I liked were, first it was like, I liked Paul Joseph Watson and Milo Yiannopoulos, Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder, and also some of the skeptic community like Sargon and the Amazing Atheist for a more left-wing perspective. And I also became friends with Spinosauruskin at that time. You have to understand, back at this time, Spinosauruskin and Kraut and T were considered anti-SJWs. And I also liked this one person, and I also liked the furthest right people that I liked were Edgy Sphinx back when he was still more mainstream, and Naked Ape. Those were the two. And I watched all of their videos. I really liked all of them. And then, I started becoming more anti-alt-right when I was tricked by Kraut and T and Spinosauruskin's video about exposing Edgy Sphinx as like a fraud or something. When really that was it was only later that I heard Edgy Sphinx's actual side of the story and changed my mind. And, for a while I just sort of floated in this libertarian space, but also I was sort of conservative, and I also liked people like Distributist and Max Kolbe, who were sort of trad, and then I started actually reading a bit more about race and demographics, and also more about my own Catholicism and trying to reconcile that. And I've slowly came to realize through talking to many different people that, this whole libertarianism, leave people alone, that sort of idea, that might be like what my personality is. That's not really what's good for the country. It's not really.
What I will say, and I'm not a libertarian, I'm an anarchist, but that's not actually what libertarianism is. But anyways.
I get, well, that might have also been part of it, because when I was a libertarian, if I were to have described libertarianism, it would have been something like, well, we need to have the freedom, the space to be able to be ourselves, essentially. We need a certain space. Maybe the government's necessary to create that space. Maybe the ANCAPs have a point, but we need a certain space in order to have a good life and be ourselves.
But what that is would be what, as Dave Rubin says, classic liberalism. Some can argue that's what libertarianism isn't, but no, that's kind of Jeffersonian libertarianism, what you just described, very laissez-faire. That's not what I would say libertarianism is.
Out of curiosity, what would you say libertarianism is?
Libertarianism is very similar to minarchism, and I'm pretty sure Alchemist can attest to that. It's where it's a little bit different, because minarchism is like, limited government as much as possible. Libertarianism is a lot broader. But pretty much it's essential as like bare bones government and leave us alone to be able to make our own decisions. It's somewhat of a half step away from anarchism, because anarchism just says get rid of government because it's literally non-essential and it causes problems, and it always has. And amongst other things, get rid of Big Brother and everything else.
Would you consider anarcho-capitalists or libertarian anarchists to be anarchists?
Anarcho-capitalism is a complete joke and fraudulent, but that's a whole other discussion.
All right,
but it literally is fraudulent. Like it follows no tradition. It hijacks terms and does literally nothing. It has not come up with any ideological, philosophical progression amongst anything. No,
are there any
real
ANCAPs on here?
Communists, socialists, none of us who are anti-state establishment acknowledge them at all. Any of us you will actually see out here on May Day, on any May Day, we don't acknowledge them, because all anarcho-capitalism, this is all it goes out, is they sit in their couch, they make a little bit of money, and think they know. They don't create businesses. If we're talking from an economic, they don't live by. They're hypocritical because they don't live by their principles. They're not capitalists. No anarcho-capitalist is an actual capitalist. Alchemist, show me one of them that's an actual capitalist. Actual capitalists will be like, oh, they laugh at that. They laugh at something like anarcho-capitalism.
Are you trying to say that anarcho-capitalists are fake anarchists?
Please do not believe and put period blood on the doggone name of anarchism. Don't believe pour feces all over anarchism. It's muddying the name and waters. Anarcho-socialism's a real thing. Anarcho-communism is a real thing. Show me where this is. History. Show me where capitalism showed up on the scene.
You turned into a demon.
So maybe this might actually be a point of agreement between you and I, because perhaps the reason why I am more amenable to anarcho-capitalism than other forms of anarchism is because I myself am not an anarchist.
But here's the thing. All right, let me ask you this question. What is your perception on anarchism? Have you ever studied the philosophy?
Well, I think, a society without a state is like a society without a humanity. It's impossible.
What? Interesting. So wait, time out. Nazi Germany had what?
Nazi Germany had a state, yes.
The USSR had what?
I'm just going to go ahead and let you two go at it.
So was Cuba? I can history.
Hey, Wonder, Wonder, your sound is going all over the place.
Yeah, I can't.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
I'm just kind of okay. We get it. Evil people have had states.
No, I didn't say anything about evil people. I'm talking about the systems. I said nothing about the people.
Okay, well,
evil
okay, but can you actually point to like a sort of can you actually point to a society that was long lasting and did not have any kind of governance or ruler?
Oh yeah. Let me address that. They are never allowed to exist. Catalonia 1936. Anybody know about that? But hold on. You know what happened? What happened to it?
Okay. Catalonia.
What happened to it?
Do you know what Catalonians did to the Catholics? All right. Have you ever even heard of the Red Terror? Dude.
When was this? When was this?
In the night, when we were talking about the Spanish anarchists, right?
Catalonia, 1936.
Yes, the Spanish anarchists.
Okay.
They basically had a government that was not a government, and they had a monetary system that was not a monetary system, and they basically murdered religious people by the droves.
Interesting. First of all, they didn't have a government. Secondly, what happened to them is you had Franco's regime.
They didn't have a government. They had a government that they called not a government.
They didn't have a government.
Well, what they had was like government might as well have had a government, basically. Like what they have.
Any form of organization is a government now.
Well, yes.
No,
Yes.
not at all.
That's
Not at all.
literally
That's
consider.
literally not what government means. So any form
No,
of
but
leadership
actually,
is government
yes.
now. No.
Government is
So
an
that's like saying, hold on. So let me get this straight. A coach of a team is now a president. Is the equivalent of a president, right? That's what you're saying?
Yes.
They are institutions that govern people.
Who?
The coach governs the team.
Governs it. The best example of a coach is a leader of men. Because trust me, you have mutinies all the time. Most failing teams don't follow coaches unless the coach is trash.
Well,
Governments have mutinies all the time. They have coup d'états. They have violent overthrows.
Coup d'états, they don't listen.
Well, they have coup d'états where
literally come to you and force you to do anything. That's what government does.
Well, so does a coach. It's just that a coach isn't as good at it. If you don't like if you don't do what the coach says, they fire you.
Oh no, coach, especially in professional sports, coaches get fired before players.
Okay,
Facts.
so
I can give that many examples.
Whoever is control the coach, they're the governor then.
They're not a government. It's not a government. What
we're talking about what we're talking about is politics, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the institutions that govern a sort of wider civil society.
That's not what government means.
Well, okay, what is government then? What definition?
All right. Let's go to the basics. Back to the basics. How did government start?
Well, I don't care. Well, I mean, why does that matter?
Well, the government, as defined, is a group of people with the authority to govern a country or state, a particular ministry and office.
Okay, but the problem is if we start going into the anthropology and what the origins of the state are, we're going to come up with different answers because
not if you go by the history. Just go by history. It's not a lie.
Well, the philosophy of government, though, it is a very broad subject. I mean, is what he's saying.
Well, history. What history? Are you talking about like what primitive tribes did?
I mean, you can go with tribes. You can go with how did the foundations of government? How did we even get governments? And this is across the board. Literally across the board. Doesn't matter which region, doesn't matter which era. You've had falls of regimes, you've had rise of regimes. It's the same game always. And when I say always, it follows Lord Acton's historical principle. It's the same game. It has never changed. It doesn't matter how they try to change up the system. It's like basketball is still basketball, football is still football, war is still war, baseball is still baseball. You can't, it's the same game. And people fall into this notion, this delusional insanity that, and I say insanity in the classic definition of, oh, we just need to put the right people. Really? Why does that never work? And when I say never, it never works.
Well, when is it? Well, I don't really think that anarchism can work. I think it goes against human nature.
When it's not given an opportunity, how can you say something doesn't work when it's literally never given an opportunity to succeed?
Why should we give something that has never existed an opportunity?
Because it's an alternative to what we know, the devil we know.
I don't really think it's even an alternative, though. I think it's just like smokescreen. Whenever I've seen like an anarchist community, whenever I've seen or a proposed plan for anarchism, it's all they always have some organization that governs in the community.
That's called society.
That they claim isn't a state because something voluntarism, something voluntary something.
Sir, I think you're confusing society and leadership for government. They are not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I consider them the same thing, basically.
So
I mean, we can talk about
political philosophies. Apparently,
we're talking about like specifically something like the modern state. The modern state has only been around for, I guess, like 500 years or so. We could have an alternative form of governance, and maybe that's what we're talking about. But we can't have a society with no governance, no leadership.
Indians have societies with no government.
Why I'm laughing? Because this is literally the statist position. And I know Alchemist is going to love where I'm coming from. So what we can do is we can literally change our form of slavery for another form of slavery, but we can't become free.
Well, what is slavery then?
Slavery means someone else, a power above you, dictates what you do, how you live, how you act. That is what slavery is.
I don't
agree. Slavery, child slavery, that is literally the definition of slavery.
I don't believe it. Well, if you define slavery like that, then I don't think slavery's bad. Because literally everything families are slavery. Children are slaves to their parents. Yes. Yes, children are slaves to their parents by your definition.
They're not?
Yes, they are.
If your parents are enslaving you, they are not parents. I'm just going to call that out right now.
Well, I don't really believe in your definition of slavery, but if we're going to define slavery by your definition,
literally the definition of slavery,
parents are slavers.
No, my parents certainly weren't enslaving us. My parents were helping us become young men and young women.
Well, my parents. My parents didn't. My parents told me what to do, and they spanked me.
Were slave drivers. That ain't my problem.
I don't think that means slave drivers. Hold on.
Well, okay, now you're just getting into personal attacks.
You brought it personal because you said I believed it. I said
but hold on.
I did not say that I did not say that you believed this. I said that the implications of your definitions would say too much, basically. It proves
what?
Too much. It proves too much. That is what I was saying.
What does that mean?
Hold on.
That it wouldn't just your definition of slavery would not just
comprehensive
states as slavers, but also most parents throughout history as slavers.
And most quote-unquote parents aren't parents. They're breeders. They're not parents.
Yeah, well,
okay, so,
all right, hold on. But hold on. I don't think by virtue of parents telling their children what to do that makes them slave drivers. That's a bit extreme.
That is a bit extreme, yes. And that's exactly what I was trying to get at. Can you understand where I'm coming from, at least? I mean, I can understand where you are coming from, but can you understand where I am coming from and why I don't believe in what you're saying? Now, if we were to talk about...
To answer your question, do I understand where you're coming from? Yes, and I'll explain, but I'll give a caveat to that. I understand where you're coming from because you don't understand my position. That's the problem. You don't.
Okay,
And
what is
the reason
your
I can
position
confidently
then?
say that is because very few people actually understand my position. Anyone who understands my position instantly agrees with me, and it's not groupthink because I'm not asking for groupthink. You may laugh it off. Alchemist.
It's like
Hold on.
it's like
Alchemist.
that is the most arrogant thing I've ever heard.
Hold on. Again, you're laughing
I've
at what
heard
I'm
more-
saying. You don't
YouTube
know my
atheist.
position. That's the
Well,
thing.
okay,
Alchemist.
just making these sweeping you're making these sweeping statements, and you're not really okay. Let's start over for
How
a
in
second.
depth do you want me to go about my position?
Okay, what is exact? Okay, why? First of all, what is slavery? All right, and what?
Slavery, once again, is any entity. And I say entity. It doesn't matter if it's a system. It doesn't matter if it's an individual. It doesn't matter if it's a group. Any entity that literally forces an individual to compulsively do tasks, to live a certain way, to act a certain way, to think a certain way. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Wage slavery is a thing. It's been a thing since the fall of chattel slavery, by the way. We're still in wage slavery. Change.
All right, now I'll jump in here real quick. So back to Mr. Geocon's point.
I mean,
Do parents not tell children what to do?
parents do tell children what to do. And if
No, hold on. No wonder. This is kind of, I think I get where he's coming from. If parents tell children what to do, and to some extent they do have to tell them how to think about certain things, right?
No.
Yes.
No, it's
because,
not.
No.
Yes.
Yes, because if a parent instructs a child to say, look both ways before crossing a street, they're telling them how to think about performing a certain task, and they're telling them to do so because it's in their best interest in terms of their survival and well-being. That's a good parent, right? And that's them telling the kid what to do and how to think to some extent.
That's a parent.
See, that's why by
explaining and educating, though.
Yeah,
but that's still telling them what to do, though.
That's not telling you what.
Yes, it is.
The parent
I mean,
is
you can
educating you. Still,
maybe
Yo, Dad,
let
if
me
you
help
want,
you with this, because maybe we can save your idea from this, because your idea doesn't necessarily rely on all the slavery being defined the way you've defined it. Perhaps slavery could mean a person unjustly telling you what to do.
Wait. What part of force is not being understood here? I clearly have indicated force.
Children,
What I said
children,
multiple times.
parents use force on their children. If the child is unruly or naughty, the parent can spank the child or put them in timeout.
That's called discipline for bad behavior.
That is discipline. Yes, I would consider discipline a form of force, and I'd say it's justified.
Really?
Yes. I mean, it's literally you slapping, like if I would go to a grown man and slap him on the behind for him not doing what I say, that's force, right? That I could be.
No. Wait. Time out. You're talking two different things at the same time, though, because you clearly said a child doing unruly, naughty behavior. Now, unruly and naughty, correct me if I'm wrong, are doing things that are detrimental to one's own or another's health. Correct?
Sure, yeah.
That's not the same as disagreeing with your parents and doing opposite. Your parents tell you not to stay out at late. You stay out at late. That's not the same.
Okay, but that is the same thing, because I would consider that to be a part of being unruly and naughty.
I will suggest you need to deal with kids then, because that is not how this works.
but wouldn't that behavior be considered unruly?
Because you're
depends on the parents you're dealing with. Depends on the parents you're dealing with. Honestly,
no.
I mean, you could easily save this idea of anarchism just by saying, the government.
Parenting doesn't. Well, first of all, parenting doesn't deal with anarchism. But anyways, that's The only way it deals with anarchism is if you're talking about the family unit in it itself and abroad. You once again, like I said, you do not understand what I mean by anarchism. Like it is readily apparent, very readily apparent.
Okay, but you don't understand what I mean by family then, because you're basically saying that
We haven't been talking about.
you define slavery in such a way that and you're not willing to apply that definition to the family unit.
Because a family is not a slave establishment. It is not a plantation. It's not.
But you included an entity forcing someone to do something as part of your definition.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I would like to. Maybe you could revise your definition, your argument, so that slavery
because parents don't force.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
A lot of parents that never force their children.
I'll give an example.
Their children how to think.
I'll give an example.
Okay. Yes, they do. My parents indoctrinated me into Catholicism. Now, I might have fallen out of that somewhat as a teenager, but I was indoctrinated into Catholicism, and I pray every day.
Indoctrinated
stuff.
That's not education.
Well, that is the education.
No, education is not
indoctrinate means to teach.
Indoctrinate, specifically, when we talk about indoctrination is basically, it has the negative connotation because you're teaching without giving an alternative to what you're teaching.
Once again, it's not educating. Educating teaches you how. Teaches
yes,
you.
Look at the definition right
think
here.
For yourself.
To give, indoctrination. Definition 1, to instruct, especially in fundamentals or rudiments, teach. Definition 2, to imbue with a usually partisan or sectarian opinion, point of view. So those are two different definitions. Now the reason why most people treat indoctrination as something bad is because you're teaching someone something without giving them the alternative point of view. And that's usually what you do with children, because children
that's not necessarily what you do with children. I'm sorry if that's how they were instructed, but that's not education, man. I'll bring for an example the example of martial arts. Martial arts, any great sensei, any great trainer will show you multiple ways. If the method that person normally teaches doesn't work, they will literally hold a teaching doctrine, if you will, for you. Iron Mike Tyson with Cosmato.
Well, I'm willing to accept this dichotomy between education and indoctrination. I just refuse to accept that indoctrination in all cases is bad.
Well, I mean, indoctrination and same with the state isn't involved in it.
Well, I mean, first of all, the parents have the prime duty in educating their children. It's just that in the modern day, parents are expected by society to outsource that duty to the state. And I'm against public education, so I think
that's the mainstream thought, because a lot of parents don't do that. For example, mine and a lot of parents I've known were the primary teachers. Yes, they had the schools to aid. And that's the key word, aid. But that was not the primary source of our education. Because a lot of what I knew, I gained from my parents. I mean, I gained personally, but I gained from my parents. And I've known a lot of parents who personally taught children.
Yeah, I had parents who taught me a lot too. And the public schools honestly just kind of taught me, like, how to some basics on how to read and do math. And that was the most that they were able to teach me. I learned most of the stuff about history and politics on my own.
Of course, because they don't once again, they don't educate. That's what I'm indicating. They don't educate you. It's not an education system.
Well, they don't really do a good job of. I mean, this is the. I would say that look, here's the thing. If you were proposing if your system that you were proposing, this so-called anarchist system, were to show like an alternative, a very different way of governance and leadership, then I might be willing to talk to you about this.
Well,
But if
you're still stuck on the issue of governance and not leadership. Leadership is fluid. Leadership is not this rigid hierarchy like you have with and Alchemist loves corporations, right? Anyone who's ever
fluid?
Go ahead.
I mean, if we're talking about, I've read some left-wing anarchist stuff, and the only form of leadership they claim to be justified is the type of leadership where, it's sort of the leadership of an expert, it's where you go to an expert and you voluntarily say to that expert, hey, I need your help. And the expert says, okay, follow my lead and I'll teach you how to do things. And at any time, if you think the expert isn't doing a good job, you can just, get out of that or fire them or whatever. You said
that was the form of left-wing anarchism you heard. Let me educate you on something about anarchism. Anarchism and anarchy is the broadest political ideology they're out there. There are at least 10 different schools of thought. Most ideologies have 3 to 5. Now, the reason I bring this up, most people are not anarchists.
Okay, I think the guy who
I was... different anarchists, you will have a different perspective on how leadership works. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's very adaptable, utilitarian, and flexible, and it can change with the times and the situations. Unlike with governments remain static. They're not progressive. Well, they don't look correct.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Also to go back to the thing about slavery, because I want some clarification here. Does anyone here know how chattel slavery, for example, just specifically in the United States, how chattel slavery worked in the United States? Does anyone specifically know? Because I can easily explain as to what I mean by slavery with that institution.
Well, basically, it was all over crops like cotton and stuff like that. It was basically the government forcing over it, and basically subsidizing the cotton industry.
No, that's not what happened. That's not where slavery in the United States started, and that's not what happened. That may have what it devolved into, but that's not how it started.
If I remember correctly, it may have started as, a sort of indentured servitude where you were supposed to work you were in exchange for your passage over to America, you were expected to work for no wage for a master for a certain amount of time, and then after that time you were released from that service, unless of course the master found a way to lengthen that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then
that's exactly how it started.
And then over time, this system of it went both ways. It could have been you could have black settlers owning whites in this way, or white settlers owning black people this way, or white people owning white people in this way, and black people owning black people. And over time, as the system evolved, and we had this idea of we developed this idea of white versus black, and we also and the system also evolved into chattel slavery, where the slaves were considered the literal property of the masters, which is which in a lot of ways is a more classical understanding of slavery, because when we talk about slavery, if I remember, now this is from a document called De Justia de Jure. It's supposed to be, I think it was written in the 18th century. Wait. it was written by let's see, De Justia de Jure. Yeah, Hernando de Soto wrote this in the 16th century. Sorry.
Okay.
And Hernando de Soto defines slavery as this: slavery consists in this, that the man is obliged for his entire life to devote his labor and services to a master. Now, as anybody may justly bind himself for the sake of some anticipated reward to give his entire services to a master for a year, and he would in justice be bound to fulfill this contract, why may not he bind himself in like manner for a longer period, even for his entire lifetime, an obligation which would constitute slavery? This was, I believe, the Hernando de Soto's argument from slavery for the justice of slavery. Now, what I would say to that is, I don't think that as a Christian you have the right to own another person, and if if you own the entirety of somebody's labor, or a good portion of their labor, then that would constitute slavery. So,
which goes back, and I'm glad you brought all of that up, because it confirms everything that I've been talking about when I talk about government. And I know Alchemist loves the phrase taxation is theft.
Well,
the government says you have to utilize our form of currency. The government says you have to act a certain way, because if you don't, we will kidnap you or kill you, and we have the quote-unquote legal right to do so. The government says, by law, I'm not making this up, you can go look at the laws. The government says you must comply with law enforcement, aka slave driving. I mean, I can go on and on if you want me to. From when I say wage slavery, it's the exact same game. You have to do exactly and act a certain way and fit within, because if you don't, we're going to garnish your wages. We're going to let you go. We're going to fire you. If you don't, we're going to punish you. And I'm not saying for foolishness. I'm saying for people. I mean, you hear about it in academia. You hear about it in corporate America. People get fired for nonsense, literal nonsense. They did nothing wrong. Oh, well, you made us look bad, so we're just going to have to let you go. That's slavery, bro.
Okay. So here's my response to that.
Mm-hmm.
If the government only took a portion of your income and basically otherwise just let you use your income how you wanted, how is that slavery?
Did they allow me? Well, hold on. One concept that we need to bring up historically is called because a lot of statists will argue this, including a lot of libertarians and whatnot, a social contract. Last time I checked, gentlemen, from a legal perspective,
I don't believe in the social contract.
I'm glad you don't. Good man. a lot of people hold this position. This is where the argument from a lot of government apologists say.
You can't really justify authority from above with consent from below, at least not entirely. Now you can say
social contract, as long as you're born, you agree to this. When did I ever sign? Last time I checked, you had to be a major, you had to be an adult in order to sign a contract, right? When did I ever sign to be taxed? Last time I checked, I never signed for anything.
But what if I don't consent to live in an anarchist society, though? I mean, if I was born in an anarchist,
leave it as you like.
Well, you can leave any government you like.
No, you can't. There's something called a passport, and if you don't have one, what happens?
Well,
anybody?
I mean, you can. That seems like such a small thing, though.
Small?
Yes.
You once again determining which plantation I live in.
Well, okay, but that's not. But you're defining. So then it's not really about being able to leave and consent freely. It's about this. It's not really about the consent, is it? It's about the conditions.
Because consent equates freedom, it equates voluntary activity.
Well, I don't really believe
leave the nation if I want to, without procedures.
Well, I didn't volunteer. Well, I didn't really sign any of your moral laws. Why should I believe in what in your like voluntarism? I didn't consent to that. I didn't
Wait,
consent to
consent
that.
to moral laws. Wait. What are you talking about?
Well,
I
this
don't.
is.
I don't enforce my morality on anybody. A
Well,
lot of people live opposite of how I would consider necessarily right. And I'm an anarchist. I'm about freedom as long as you're not hurting people. I mean, there's a little bit more to it than that, but hurt encompasses a lot of things. Theft hurts. Murder hurts people. Abuse hurts people. Actual things that violate the natural rights of mankind and the natural order of
I
things.
didn't really volunteer. What made about natural light? What makes me have to respect the natural rights of mankind as you
You
define
don't
them?
have to, but what happens is there will be repercussions if you don't, because that's just how life works. The
Well,
thing is,
isn't that forcing in your view?
universal. No, it's not universal. It's called, if you want to take from a law of physics, Newton's third law of motion is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
That's the same thing for government. You know, if you break the law, they come and arrest you. Equal and opposite reaction.
A government, no, that's not what government does. Government says if you're powerful enough, if you're powerful enough and wealthy enough, influential enough, you can buy your way out of any damn thing. Hillary Clinton isn't locked up right now. Why? Even though she's broken multiple federal laws. I'm conservative when I say multiple.
Sorry for interrupt. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but this is kind of getting me excited. People with power, yes, people with power are able to manipulate the system. So,
which goes back to how governments were created. So, for those who don't know, in every society, governments were created by whom?
Powerful people.
Which group? Which class of people?
Powerful people.
Which class of people?
Okay, you know, people with money and power.
There's an exact group of people. There's a name. It's called the aristocracy.
Okay. Okay.
The aristocracy were the ones. And if you want evidence for one specific evidence, look to the Magna Carta in 1215. Anybody know what happened?
You know, the aristocracy got tired of the king. Yes, we all heard of that. And so they said, we gotta, you can't steal our property because we are the ones who we have these rights, basically. We have these traditions and we have a certain way of doing things, and you can't just stomp all over them because we actually have the power over you, Mr. King.
That's one way to say it. I say it simply is pretty much we're telling you how you're going to operate. And that literally impacted Britain to this very day. That's why you have a parliament in the United Kingdom. It's because of 1215. We're talking 800 years later because of one document.
Okay, yeah.
The aristocracy were the ones that determined it. People say freedom. Really, where was the freedom? Where was the freedom in the 15th century, in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century? Where was the freedom?
Well, freedom is kind of this.
Could not rise up. There's no freedom in there.
Well, freedom is kind of a buzzword. You know, what is freedom? You know, freedom just means whatever ideological group thinks freedom means. You know,
really?
Freedom means different things to different people. You know, libertarians have one definition of freedom, communists have another definition, Christians have another definition. You know, freedom is just an abstract term. It doesn't really have a set definition.
Where I'll step in and let you know where I come from. I come from a philosophical viewpoint on things and scrutiny. We don't just accept, things just happen because of hand waving. It's just cause. Just cause is how we're in the mess that we're in today. That's not how the world works. Things don't just happen. Things happen.
Saying just cause, but what I was saying, sir, is that I was just saying that different groups define freedom in different ways. Is that
That's
a
and all.
crucial statement? Is
But
that a
what is freedom? That
Well-
still doesn't answer the question, though. What is freedom?
well, I don't know. What is
Okay.
freedom? Well, I mean, why should okay?
I'll
What?
offer the solution. Freedom is the ability to do whatever you desire.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Well-
So explain how
You can't
that's
do whatever you desire.
Wait, why can't? Well, that's what that is the nature of freedom. Now, I'm not saying there's
I mean, reality doesn't let you do whatever you want.
then that wait. Then that means you're not totally free. There are laws of nature which do bind us. Correct. I'm not saying that there is such as total freedom, but literally freedom is the ability to do what you desire. That is what freedom is.
Well,
In the
that type
simplest
of
thing,
freedom
it's all
doesn't
logic
exist.
rhetoric.
well, okay. What if I desire? What if I'm addicted to heroin and I desire more heroin? Am I free in
You
that?
keep shooting up. You're free to do that.
Well,
Okay.
I don't consider that freedom. I consider that enslavement.
I mean, but you chose to do that, correct? Nobody forced you to do it, right?
Well, not every. That assumes your definition of freedom.
But you just said that you don't have a definition of freedom, so how are you saying it's assuming mine? I presented a solution. You had
Well,
one.
I never did say that I don't have a definition of freedom.
You just literally said you don't know.
Well, I was just saying that, sir. You know, I was like, I don't know. I was, you know, you know that I have okay. Maybe I haven't made my.
I know nothing. I don't ever assume anything.
I mean, I'm kind of taking a skeptical view here. All right.
Okay.
You know,
That's cool and
problem-
all, but
the problem with
so would you actually present a counter argument to why that's not freedom?
okay, what do you mean by why do you well, I'm just kind of curious. Why do you consider freedom to be the ability to do what you want?
The ability to do what you desire. Here's why. When I talk about, I look for the essence of matters. I look for, in a very metaphysical, the isness of things. This is. I look for the absolutes and universals and go from there. The objective truths and reality. I'm not a modernist. I'm not a relativist. I reject those because they don't hold. I look for things that holistically are encompassing and comprehensive. When I say freedom is the ability to do what you desire, it's very simple. I can explain that to a child understands it. You can't explain laws to a child, they don't understand it. You can unexplain, okay, so why do we have stop signs? Why do we have street lights? Well, it's for these and this. Simple. I'm about rules. All right. So
Don't those inhibit freedom, though?
yeah, parameters are good. Here's why parameters are good.
But
and
what
here's
if
the
somebody
difference between laws.
desires not to adhere to those parameters?
Well, you can still do. That don't mean you don't have consequences.
What if someone
example,
desires to
a
not be
parameter-
subject to those consequences?
Well, that's not how life works. For example,
Well, then
Okay,
that
so-
definition of freedom doesn't work.
hold on. I'll give an example. You have the freedom to drive how you want to on a cliffside. We put up rails, not in every place, because in Costa Rica they didn't have rails. You could have fell off the cliffside. But rails get put up. Why? Because they saying we're putting a rule that you do not fly off the cliff. You can't drive how you want to. Someone says, I don't care. I'm going to drive how they want to. I'm going to go through that railing and fall to my death. You have the freedom to drive how you want to. Now, there can be negative repercussions towards dumb actions. And that's kind of natural selection too. But I mean, if you want to be an idiot, you have the freedom to be an idiot. Just like you have the freedom to do things that are constructive. You have a freedom to keep shooting up heroin if you want to. But the end result is you're probably going to OD and die. That's just how it works.
What if what if that person desires not to be subject to any consequence?
Well, their consequences are good, bad, and different. Neutral. It doesn't matter.
Right,
There's
right,
always
but
consequences.
I would just.
Good, but the way freedom was defined was that the ability to do that which you desire. Well, those desires are inherently limited. Yes.
Yeah,
Not
and desire
depends
and
on
those desires
on the
also like what
matter
desire,
that you're doing.
and this sort of leaves off like what do you have to is it good to desire something and bad to desire another thing? What ought you desire?